Welcome to the distance learning program on cloud computing by Innobus. In this chapter, we'll be covering the following topics: attributes of cloud, history of cloud, technology used behind the cloud, advantages and disadvantages of cloud, application for business, cloud service providers, cloud computing terminologies, and cloud computing architecture. Let's check what are the different characteristics of cloud. The first and the number one characteristics of cloud is its resources are pooled. Resource pooling is one of the important features in cloud computing. Cloud computing is simply a set of pooled computing resources and services delivered over the web. Another one is in cloud computing, it is on demand and user defined. The users are able to provision, monitor and manage their resources, and these monitoring and provisioning and management are based on users' need. The user can define whether to use or not to use the resources which are available, and the resources can be CPU, memory and storage. Another characteristic is elasticity. Cloud computing gives the feature of elasticity in all possible resources. In cloud computing, it allows to increase as well as to decrease its resources without much hassle. Another point on attributes of cloud computing is that the resources are measured. The resource utilization is tracked for each user and for each application on a used method, otherwise pay-as-you-go method. The resources will be counted for how long or for what time frame the user is using the resources. Another point is that the computing is the computing is considered as a utility in cloud computing platform. Now let's go ahead and check what is the history of cloud. In 1960, by Mr. John McCarthy, he introduced the concept of cloud to the world, and he introduced it as an opinion with the computation can be organized as a public utility. Then using the cloud technology for a public or for a private or for a hybrid technology, the cloud was introduced to the world as a public utility. And in the same time, the concept of cloud computing was introduced to the world by telecom companies. Telecom companies were using their networks or as a point-to-point networks or point-to-point data circuits for their customers for serving their different services or products to its customers. And they introduced the cloud for serving VPN, virtual private networks, to its customers for improved business. And the key role in the history of cloud computing was by Amazon. In the 90s and in 2000s, Amazon introduced clouds to its business for running its day-to-day transaction much easier. It has got a number of data centers which used in the backend of Amazon for running their business, and while moving those data centers into cloud, and they have saved more than 10% on their expenditure on the day-to-day business. And in 2006, Amazon introduced Amazon Web Services to the world as a cloud infrastructure platform. Another invention in the history of cloud was Eucalyptus. It happened in 2008, and Eucalyptus is nothing but an open source API compatible platform for deploying private clouds, where the end user can go ahead and use Eucalyptus for deploying his or her application into a private cloud. In the same year 2008, another technology was developed, and it was OpenNebula, where OpenNebula was majorly used for innovations in the side of hybrid and for the federation of clouds. Now let's go ahead and check what is the working of cloud. The cloud has been divided into two different parts. It has got a front end and it has got a back end. The front end includes the end user computer, at the same time the application the end user is using to access the cloud system. And the back end, it includes various computer servers, data storage, and processing, and otherwise number of processor and clusters. For an example, in the cloud we could say Gmail, where the end user is accessing his or her mail to access Gmail, and the end user gets in the front end a GUI where the end user can send, compose, and write messages. And in the backend, it's number of mail servers which is working behind the Gmail for sending and receiving emails. Let's check what are the advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing. Let's take a look at what are the advantages of cloud computing or using the cloud infrastructure. The first one is that it is less expensive. While compared to other traditional hosting systems or in-house data centers, the cloud computing or cloud infrastructure is less expensive. The end user does not require to buy a hardware for running his or her application, does not require to buy high or huge number of processor for running his or her application. Another point is that it is scalable. Most of the available resources in the cloud infrastructure are scalable. The end user can go ahead and increase, at the same time can decrease the resources available over the cloud infrastructure. Another one is that in cloud, the services offered over the cloud infrastructure are flexible. The end user can design or bend the services according to the need over the cloud infrastructure. Another point is that the feature of elasticity is available over the cloud infrastructure. In cloud computing, from an IP address to memory, all these resources are elastic. We can move it from one server to another without much hassle. It's like just a click away. Now let's take a look at what are the disadvantages of using the cloud infrastructure. The major disadvantages is security, where in cloud infrastructure we are running our application in a third-party environment, and the end user gets the privileges to set the firewall as well as to set the security settings on the server, but the limit is very much less when compared to an in-house data center. And another point in disadvantages is that the data transfer charges are always extra. While compared to a data center based server, each and every bit that comes in and goes out of our server is being counted in cloud infrastructure. You need to pay for the data transfer charges while using cloud infrastructure for running your web application. Another point is that the migration is a difficult task. Let it be a migration from one cloud infrastructure to another cloud infrastructure, or from an in-house data center to cloud infrastructure. The migration is a difficult task. Now let's take a look at what are the application for business in the cloud technology. The role of cloud computing for business is more and more prominent nowadays. Indeed, cloud computing is probably the most buzzed technology today. And also we know that cloud has proven that it can help small business to medium business and to big enterprise to cut costs while improving their productivity, which in case results in improved business. As we discussed before, application or using the cloud application for running the business always results in less expenditure, where we don't, instead of buying huge number of hardware for creating a clustered environment, when it comes to cloud computing, we don't need to buy a lot number of servers for creating the network. Let's take a look at what are the major players who are using the cloud for the application for their business. For number one would be Google App for Business, where the end user gets the GUI, and the backend is completely on a cloud infrastructure in Google Apps. And also the Skype, which is being used by all over the world by millions of users, and the Skype is also running over the cloud. And Evernote, one of the best desktop based application, as well as a mobile application, as well as a web application, it's also being running its environment in the cloud infrastructure. Another one is Basecamp, which is one of the major project management tool, and that's also running its business over the cloud infrastructure. Now let's take a look at who are the different cloud service providers. The number one will be Amazon Web Services. As we discussed before, Amazon introduced AWS to the world in 2006, and it has got different services which is spread over the cloud infrastructure, where the end user can go ahead and use these services to run his or her web application, as well as a mobile application or a mail application. Another provider is Microsoft Azure, where we get almost all of the services or servers or the technology which Microsoft is being offered, and we can use the same technology over the cloud of Microsoft, which is Azure, from SQL Server to Server 2008 R2, as well as from SharePoint. Each and every technology is being used over the Microsoft Azure for running an application which is based on Microsoft's .NET. And basically most of all the services in Microsoft Azure cloud infrastructure is running in Silverlight. It's a basic requirement, in fact. Another player is Google App Engine, which is one of the prominent or booming cloud service provider in today's world, where, well, compared to two others, as we discussed before, Amazon and Microsoft, Google presented its cloud to the world in a different way. They've based on a API based, otherwise an SDK based interface, where the end user can go ahead and use the API to deploy the application into the cloud. And Google provides both the API to deploy the application and also the cloud to run the business. Now let's take a look at what are the different cloud computing terminologies. The first one is infrastructure as a service. Let's take an example of Amazon, where the end user gets the infrastructure, the hardware which is running over the virtualized environment, where the end user can go ahead and choose what kind of operating system he or she needs. Let it be Unix, let it be Linux, or let it be Windows. And we can run our application by configuring these servers. And AWS is one of the best examples for infrastructure as a service for cloud. Another one is software as a service. As we discussed before, Google App for Business, Skype, all these softwares are running on the cloud infrastructure, and these are the softwares based on the cloud infrastructure, and they are the best example for software as a service cloud computing, where customer gets the service and the software is based on the cloud infrastructure. Another point is that platform as a service, where the end user gets the platform along with the cloud infrastructure to deploy his or her application. The example would be PHP Fork, where the end user can go ahead and deploy his or her PHP based application. The end user gets the API to deploy the application, and also the cloud infrastructure is also being given through the API for running the application. Now let's take a look at what is the cloud computing infrastructure. As we discussed before, the three terminologies which comes from infrastructure as a service to software as a service and platform as a service. If you take a look at this picture, the application development SDK, which is being considered as a part of platform as a service, where the end user gets the SDK to deploy the application into the cloud infrastructure. The cloud infrastructure includes compute resources, storage resources, and network resources. And the cloud application is being deployed in the cloud infrastructure using the SDK. And as we discussed before, PHP Fork is one of the examples for this. And if you take EC2, Amazon or Amazon Web Services, it gives the infrastructure services. The end user gets the computing resources, storage resources, and networking resources, and he or she can deploy the application into this infrastructure. Another one from is infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. The another terminology that we discussed was platform as a service, otherwise software as a service, where the software as a service is being served using the same cloud infrastructure, and it's being deployed over the cloud using different services. And also, as we discussed before, the security services is also incorporated in the cloud architecture, and the management services by using different kits like webmin or Plesk or cPanel. We can also deploy the same services or same software into our cloud for improved administration. That's all about the cloud architecture. And now let's take a look at what is all about the cloud. Cloud is basically considered as a service. It can be three different type of services. It can be platform, or it can be software, it can be infrastructure. And it always results in improved business by less expenditure on day-to-day business, and by high rate of or high feasibility or high flexibility and elasticity on all these resources, which results automatically on improved business. Another point is easy administration. The cloud infrastructure or the application, let it be web application or mobile application, which is running in the cloud infrastructure, is easy to administrate. And now let's go to the next chapter, which would be virtualization of cloud.